Hello and welcome to the Edge webinar series. I'm delighted to have you here today. I'm Mary Maguire, the author of The Female Edge and obviously the host of the Edge webinar series, where we look at the intersectionality between work, career, life, female leaders, good relationships, and any other inspiration that helps us to have a more fulfilled life. And today I'm delighted to be joined by a fellow author, Elizabeth Duncan Hawker. And Elizabeth is going to talk to us very much about how to build effective relationships and thinking about the Great Reconnection. So I'm very excited to have Elizabeth here today. We talk regularly and we've collaborated over the years on a number of things. So Elizabeth, welcome. It's great to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Mary. This is just such a great example of how you and I met at another business thing years ago, and we collected each other. And that's what Collecting True Friends is about. I don't know the book. There you go.
Yeah,
Collecting
that's
True
it.
Friends. It's the concept of that you're being very intentional, that you find somebody you think your values align, but you got to test it out. And you and I are a great example of that. And we have continued our friendship. And we strengthened our friendship over the pandemic that we all have hopefully gotten through most of it by now. And we started this beautiful discussion, and you were like, well, what's going on? I said, I am so tired of people telling me that they've been in their bubble as an excuse for why they're not following up with people. So thank you for having me today.
Absolute pleasure. So let's start by hearing a little bit more about you, about your background, about what you do.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. I've traveled all over America. My dad was civil service, which is like military, and we lived we actually moved 7 different times before I got into high school. So it was what I called the constant reboot. So, and now that everybody has computers, we understood that. But back then as a kid, I'm like, what is wrong with this? That we get to a new town, have to make new friends, have to have my room set up differently. People don't know, like, and trust me yet. And it was a constant reboot. So I built those skills as a child, because, and for those that are looking at me, I've got a flaming mop of red hair and stark blue eyes, and I'm just as pale. So I don't look like your average person. So a blue-eyed redhead, just for your listeners to know, is a 1% of the population. So we are actually an official mutation. So people would look at me like that, like, okay, great. Who's the mutant kid that's coming here? And then those skills took me into going into schools and then college, and had a wonderful career in corporate, except I worked too many hours. I was working 60-hour work weeks and raised 3 daughters, kept my marriage thriving, and along the way kept a lot of and dozens of really strong friendships, because I made the efforts. Because what I learned a long time ago, and I love how you're doing the female edge here, is women, we need each other. There's just certain times that talking to your parents is not going to do it. Talking to your husband or your spouse or your partner is not going to do it. We need other women as in friendships that want nothing from us, but they want everything for us. And they bring out something in us that is very unique. And men need it too. And I've seen that a lot. In fact, I encouraged my husband, Mary. Now, I'll take a sidebar here for a moment, but I encouraged him. I'm like, you need to go get some guy friends. And he's like, do I look like I need more friends? I'm like, yes, you do. Because there's a richness that you can have with your own friends in the relationships, because they see you through the good, the bad, the ugly, that you can't have like with your coworkers, for example. And in some cases, you shouldn't have all that with your coworkers, right? But anyhow, it's wonderful to be here. So I've been on a journey for 50 years collecting friends, and I've done it in business. I've started relationships everywhere I've gone. That's how you and I got to meet. I'm pretty sure that I stalked you in the conference room, and I was like, hey, you look interesting. I want to get to know you. I do remember your gesture. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember when you handed me your book?
Yeah. And that was the first book coming home to you. Yeah.
And I was so taken back with that. I remember holding it, coming home to you. And I was in so much awe, Mary, that I was standing in front of an author. And I had no idea. This just goes to show how the world changes for people. And I hope everyone's listening to this. When you're meeting somebody and you're having a moment of you're like just in awe of them of what they've accomplished, you might be going there next. So take that moment and own it. And but I remember that thinking about that, I was like, this is so neat that she has done this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was very proud of it at the time. It was my first one. As you know, we've got the Female Edge and soon to be launched Inclusion Edge as well. So yeah, it's been quite a journey. And you're there yourself. So tell me what's happened since you left corporate life. You've been out of the corporate job, the time vampire that was taking at least 60
Right.
hours of your week. You've left that. So what have you done since you've left corporate? Because I know you've gone into a number of interesting things and you do some great work.
Yeah, I did. And what's interesting is that here's another lesson for everybody to know. You don't know where you're going to go in the future. And that's why, in fact, I just did a speech on this week about that. Where you're at now and where you want to go is going to require connections. And when I was in corporate, I remember being very busy on LinkedIn. And people would say, what are you looking for a job? And I'm like, I'm building a network. What's wrong with you people? But in their mind's eye, they're like, why would you ever get on a social media platform? You don't need to do that. And I'm like, because all these vendors that have come in through here, all of these consultants, all of these government officials, all of these people that have walked through these doors, I want them to remember me. And I've always had that mentality. So when I was in corporate, I also was building my network and looking at that. And I did strategic business launches, growth, niching, taking and launching us into new marketplaces, and mergers and acquisitions. So I got to travel quite a lot and I loved it. I loved it. But then in 2015, I was able to have the opportunity to finally say, you know what? Going to retire. And they had my next promotion lined up, which is really funny because it's very hard when you've been with something a long time to let go, because your instincts telling you, hey, I'm making all this money. I know all these people. I'm really good at what I do. And then over here, the part of you is going, it's time for you to grow and do something different. So I launched as a first-time entrepreneur and I was scared to pieces. I did not know what, like, why am I doing this? But I had a colleague, and Lisa is her name. And Lisa turned around and she told me, she said, Elizabeth, you need to go and take your strategic consulting out there. And I just laughed. I was like, Lisa, you are so funny, like as the day is long. And because of her, I believed in myself and I started Red Hawk, for my last name in my hair, Red Hawk Strategic Solutions, and have had a very successful time doing that for 6 years. Then along the way, I had to pivot because I had people come up to me. In fact, it may have been at the event. In fact, I think it was at the event we were at. And the women kept coming up asking me, so do you teach people how to connect and collaborate? And back then we called it networking a few years ago. And I kept looking at my business card, and when I had handed it to them when they asked for it, and I was like, no. And I'm thinking, why can't you read my card? And then finally, after about 10 to 15 women that stood there and asked me, there was one, and she was shorter than me. She had dark hair. That's all I remember. I wish I knew her name so I could thank her. And she looks up at me and I'm looking at her and she says, can I pay you to teach me how to network? And I felt my head going forward going, yes, you can. So the journey began to do something even different within my entrepreneurship. And it's been a great thing. And then of course, becoming best-selling author last year. And the purple book behind you is actually a collaboration book that we did, which was a lot of fun. But it's a journey. But I couldn't have got there without all these amazing people that I met along the way. I'm telling you, and it sounds like the Oscars here, and I don't mean it to sound like that, but it really is true. If you're going to do anything in life, you need to learn the art of getting along with one another, and you need to learn how to show up in ways that draws people to you like magnets. The right people.
So, and I'd like to start with that, but I won't start with that. I want to go back to your book, Collecting True Friends. Now, the decision to write a book is a big one, but the actual effort it takes to write the book, or the hours that it takes to get it into the right place, get to the publisher, get it out there, that's a huge amount of investment. So what was your motivation behind the book? Why did you want to write it, and what was the difference you wanted to make for people?
Well, one was the timing, because we were in the middle of the pandemic. And Cigna Health did a study, and they found out that loneliness, so not being alone or hanging out by yourself, but loneliness. And loneliness is when you're in a crowd of people and then you do not feel connected. So during the pandemic, so many of us immediately, within the first month was great, second month was okay. But the third or fourth month, we started really feeling a great disconnect with people. We weren't hearing from people. We weren't bumping into them. We weren't even seeing people because we weren't going into places, right? Like even like the grocery store. So the isolation and the loneliness started. And I realized, and then of course, this was very divine inspired. I kept hearing things come into my heart and my head, like, you know, you need to help others. You need to help them reconnect. So I like to say that it's a divine inspired book, because God is definitely part of it, because I believe in the power of prayer. So I went and started just writing, and I didn't know who was going to publish it. I had several publishers step up for it. But it was a journey. It was just, and I just kept writing. I just kept writing and kept getting in it. And then I kept testing my theory. So at that time, Mary, Clubhouse had come out. And Clubhouse was another great tool to help people with loneliness. Oh, I was telling you about the study. So Cigna Health did a study, and loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day on our body. So I knew that we have a real problem in this worldwide with that. When people are feeling disconnected, they need some help. So Collecting True Friends, when I wrote that, was just meant to be a guidebook from a simple perspective, not a brainiac kind of academic, here's the references, here's the studies, because I can get a little nerdy on that stuff. I love stats and data, but it was meant to be like in a fun way, like here's some stories, but here's also the practicality. If you do these, this is how your life's going to get better. You'll be a magnet to those worthy of your time and devotion. If you don't do it, you're going to collect the wrong people in your life. So the book was really just meant to reach out to people that they're like, I don't know how I got here. I'm 40 years old and I have no friends. Or as the 20-year-olds are telling me right now with their devices, they walk up at my book signs and they're like, okay, all I've ever known is my phone. So, and I've been on the computer so long, nobody's teaching us this in school. And I go, great. So all generations are suffering from loneliness in a different aspect. We just don't realize that, because people don't walk around and go, I'm so lonely. We don't say that.
No. Very rarely use that as a term. Yeah. You do hear it in older people, but you're right. Most of us wouldn't say that we're lonely.
No. And we realize somebody's lonely when they want to talk to us a lot. But usually they want, unfortunately, this is how life works. Usually the time they choose to talk to us, though, Mary, is the time that then they have picked, like, you've got 10 minutes, you were dashing in to go do something. And those are the moments we need to say to ourselves, this is a human being standing in front of us. If they need to message us or talk to us, if there's some message they're supposed to hand me, I'm supposed to hand something back, but I need to stop and be present. And I think parents have noted that more so than we do in the workplace, or perhaps in our neighborhoods or in our communities. We forget that. But as parents, I think we would remember it, because our kids would actually grab our cheeks and pull us in and go, I need to talk to you. And we'd be like, okay, right? Or mommy, you're not listening. I mean, so they did a better job identifying, like, I need some time. As we get older, we've become conditioned to not say, I need some time. I actually do that with my friends, though, that I haven't seen in a while. I will text them.
You grab them by the cheeks.
I'm grabbing them by literally, I feel like I am, but I will reach out to them and I'll leave them a voicemail and I'll be like, I've missed you. I need to see you. So maybe I'm not getting my hands imprinted on their face, but I am emotionally, they're feeling it when I'm saying it. That's funny. I love it.
I wanted to go back to the term you use. I think it's a great reason for writing a book. I mean, like, really, as you said, divinely inspired, but also to be of service to humanity,
Yes.
to just reach out to people and give them some practical tools and ideas and processes they can follow to build relationships that feel more meaningful and more authentic to them. But
Yeah.
you said something really important earlier, which I want to go back to, was about learning how to be a magnet to bring the right people towards you. So how do you do that?
Well, one thing, the first thing you have to do, and people don't like this answer, Mary, so I'll tell you this. So it's an exercise. The first thing they have to do is they got to know themselves. And I know they're like, oh, Elizabeth, oh, that's woo woo. It's not woo woo. What I mean
No.
by that, and I covered, I
Mm,
think it's chapter 2, and it goes into chapter 3, is you need to sit down and write a list of your values.
mm,
What are the things that you stand for? In fact, what are the things that when people think of you, that they know? So, for example, people, obviously there's going to be some, like red hair is not a value, okay, or
mm,
big smile's not a value, but I'm known for that, okay?
mm,
Those are some things. But when you start getting beyond the superficial things, like he's got a great laugh, then you start writing down, okay, well, he's a great connector. Well, what does that mean? Oh, he's a giver.
mm,
Okay, so giving is a value. He's a
yeah,
generous person. That so then we start drilling down some of our superficial terms, we get to our values. And when you get to your values, then you're going to start being really crystal clear then on what you stand for, because then the next column is going to be, what are your not negotiables?
mm,
What are your not, and one of my not negotiables is mean people, for example.
yeah,
I don't like people that are mean to dogs. I
yeah,
don't like them that are, I see they're mean to kids. If they're mean to the waiters, because Maya Angelou said a long time ago, she said, people show you their character. You just got to start believing it.
yeah,
So if you're observing people when they are not thinking anybody's watching, that is one
mm,
of the best indicators of what their real character's like, right? So, but if you don't know that because you don't
mm,
know what your own values are, then
yeah,
how in the world are you supposed to then attract the right people? So being a magnet to those people that are worthy of your time and devotion means you got to first know you. And you can start out with something as simple as 3 values like integrity,
mm,
um, zeal. Maybe
mm,
you're a person that's and like in my world,
mm,
happiness. I
yeah,
think I
yeah,
I don't know, some people might argue that happiness is not a
mm,
value, but I think happiness is a choice.
yeah.
So it's what you're going to do with something in life.
Absolutely. I just there's a couple of things actually. I'm tingling, and I'll explain why I'm tingling inside. But also, Lisa, who's on at the moment, she says doing values work is so important to know yourself better and know what kind of people are a good fit to have in your life and your business. That's so true, Lisa. It might be Lisa Michelle. So if I should double barrel you now, Lisa Michelle. Thank you very much. I completely agree. But the tingles for me is I've just finished the draft of my third book around Inclusion Edge. And one chapter is devoted to knowing yourself and knowing your values. For the exactly same reason, I say you can't build authentic, meaningful bridges with other people and their life and their understanding, and particularly their experiences of exclusion, if you don't understand what is driving you, what is the hidden code that's driving your behavior, because that's what our values are, is the hidden code. So once we unearth them and we can articulate them, we can make much more meaningful relationships with others. They can either say, they're not my values, but I can admire them, or they're very different from my values, and here's my values. So it gives us some way of starting conversations which are based on much more feeling of and depth of what's important to us in our life, doesn't it?
It is, and I think that a lot of people just haven't maybe updated their values. They used to stand for something when they were in their 20s, for example, and by the time they get to their 40s, they kind of forgot that that's the person that they used to admire and like, or those were the
Mm,
qualities in a leader or a parent or something that they were like one day they were going, when I get there, that's how I
mm.
want to act. But we get almost what I call the boiled frog syndrome, where have you seen that terrible, I don't know if it's a true
Yeah.
science thing, but it's where
Mm,
you just stay in the hot water so long, you just kind of stew, and yet a fresh frog going into that hot water would jump out and go, heck no, I'm not going to be in this hot pot. But we just become accustomed to people's standards that are lower than ours. We become accustomed. So for example, I was in a training class last week and I was training a company team and I said, what are you seeing? And they said, well, Elizabeth, sometimes there's people that are around me and they're cussing. Or for example, sometimes that they don't want to take the time to help others. And I was like, okay, that's a great example of that you are not feeling your values are aligning with theirs. So just because that they are not acting professional or they're not acting in a way reciprocating and building the team, raise your standard. And I really believe that in our society, we need to start doing more of that. We need to just say, and I loved it when Mary, when you said, just because that's not how okay, I can respect that, but that's not how I am. We have to communicate that. We have to say to somebody, I'm sorry, this is not how I roll. Like, for example, if they're consistently late and you're bringing a team together, we wouldn't put up with that. We would pull them aside and say, hey, John or Sally, hey, this is not good. You're not respecting the team. We wouldn't continue to go, oh, that John and Sally are always late, right? Because we wouldn't do that. But I don't think in society, Mary, we're really feeling comfortable enough to stand up and say, this is not good for me because my standard's here. And if you want to keep showing up at this in work or in life or in friendship, then we're not a good match. And it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that your standards are better than their standards. It just means that you know what your standards are.
Do you think it's a harder conversation to have outside of work? So I think in work, I completely get that, and I've had them conversations, and I think anyone who's listening now or in the playback, they'll know that. But sometimes with friends, it can feel, especially if they're people you've known for some time, it can be harder to have that conversation about setting some boundaries or some expectations, or certainly just clarifying, look, these are my values, and you're constantly cutting across them in the way that you're behaving. I mean, how have you found that? Have you found that a harder conversation to have?
It is. It's a lot harder conversation to have. And what I found is give yourself like the 1 day or 2 day break before you have the conversation. Because some of our friends, and the first question I would ask you is, have you done your values list?
Yeah.
Have you looked at them? And if they still match up, so if it's like, here you are and here they are, okay, you know what, our values are aligning. Yes, I want to keep them in my life. Okay, so that's the first place you go with it. So I'm assuming that they've done that when you say like, how are you going to have the conversation? Because here's the truth, my friend. It's like, if you're finding out, like when you go back and you haven't done the values check in a while, and then you're finding, wow, you know what? They used to fit my values, but my values have changed. I've evolved. They're the same person, the barfly or the grumpy person that I knew from the beginning. And then you go, I don't want them in my life. Then it's not worth having that conversation. So, but we're going to assume for your question, if they're worth having the conversation, then yes. So wait 2 days.
Yeah.
Give it some time, take some deep breaths, pray on it, think on it, just really, because you don't want to do a knee-jerk reaction to somebody. You want to think through your words a little bit. But yes, it is necessary to have a conversation. And the best way to do that is just say, get them alone and just say, hey, there's something been bothering me. I'd really like to talk to you about it. Is it possible that we could just catch up for a little bit? And do not do it by text or email. Hello. Words only carry 7% effectiveness when you're communicating. Your voice and your tone, 38% effective, but more importantly, your body language is 55% effective. So if you were trying to make sure that you're really articulate and getting your message across, you want that 93% effective to come across, because you need to read their body language. You need to look at their eyes, or their eyes dropping down, and you're realizing they have no remorse. You know, I mean, they may say, oh, here's another one for you. If they say, well, I'll try to do better. Try is one of the biggest wasted words you'll ever have. If nobody listens to anything else today, learn this. If somebody tells you they're going to try to do something, they have no intention of doing it, because they'll turn around and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to try to do better. I'm going to try to lose weight. I'm going to try to do, no. So if they really want to be your friend, they're going to say, I hear what you're saying. I'm sorry I upset you. And I'm really surprised. And I've had some people tell me some stuff before, and I'm like, holy cow, oh my gosh, I had no idea that, oh, and that's how they came across. Oh, wow, but it hurt, because
Yeah.
I was disappointed in myself.
Hmm.
However, that's how your relationships are going to move forward. And I'll end it
Yeah.
with this one, Mary. I think people are more comfortable in a romantic relationship having that level of conversation than they have in friendships. And that's
Hmm.
one of the reasons why friendships don't last that long. And
Hmm.
yet you absolutely can have friendships last for decades and decades and lifetimes if you
Hmm.
treat them the same way with the energy. Because if you wouldn't put up with it with your mate, then you shouldn't put up with it with your friend.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a
And I was just going to say, what would I think that's great. So what I heard, and I'll summarize, is, to be the magnet for people, first of all, being really clear about who you are and what it is that is your magnetic power, as in your values. So really be clear about what they are. And then when you're clear about them, as you see people come in to you, have a look at what their values are, either because they'll come out in the conversations that you have with them, or you can see it in their behavior, or you'll see it in some other things, or you could ask them, but you'll see what their values are, and you'll see whether there's a match there. And if there's some tension but they're similar, it's probably worth investing in. Let's see if we can work out these tensions, because we clearly are quite aligned here. And if they're very different, then it might be that it's not meant to be as a friendship or a work relationship or whatever. So
yeah,
that's where
and
they get to. Is I just wanted to just check about, what about harnessing them over time? What about, you've got the friendship, you get on together. Is there any tips about keeping that going over time, especially if we've had this break because of things like COVID, or you
yes.
haven't been in touch with them for a long time, but there's somebody that feels important to you and you haven't reconnected with them?
Yes. So the first tip, because we're calling today's lessons here the Great Reconnection. One is, and then I also affectionately called it like coming out of your bubble.
Mm,
The biggest thing is don't use the bubble as an excuse.
mm,
People are so over hearing that. In the meantime, with you haven't reached out to me, for example, I could have had a whole whirlwind of terrible things happen.
yeah.
I could have had, deaths in my family. I could have
Mm,
had disease in my family. I could have had financial distraught. I mean, it could have been the worst year and a half that has
mm,
happened to me in forever. So when somebody resurfaces because they want to say, I'm going to come out of my bubble now, and they have to be sensitive when they're doing the Great Reconnection, because they have to reach out. First, pick up the phone. Please pick up the phone or let me hear your voice. If you're going to text somebody, don't text them everything that's been going on in your world. You need to do a surface recheck.
mm,
You can do a real text and say, hey, or WhatsApp.
mm,
Hey, you popped into my mind. In fact, I did it yesterday with a lady. You popped into my mind, and it was interesting because a photo had popped up of us like 3 years ago. I actually forwarded the photo to us, and you popped into my mind. Would love to catch up, know what's going on. Obviously, you notice I didn't put, here's 100 words of everything
yeah,
I'm doing. How are you?
mm,
Okay, that's not a great reconnect. That's a stinky reconnect.
mm,
So think it through. If you're gonna reach out with just a touch base, make it real short, and then schedule a time. Is it okay if I call you Monday morning?
yeah,
Or could we talk in the evening? What's best for you? Or would you be
mm,
up to a quick Zoom? And then tell them, I'd love to see you and hear your voice.
mm,
And if they're up to being in person and they don't
yeah,
live far away, that's even better. I
yeah,
would love to have a cup of coffee. I would love to go for a walk our dogs together like we
yeah,
used to. I mean, tell them that. Here's the second part of it, though. When you reconnect, make sure you're asking them for nothing.
mm,
That's the biggest thing I'm seeing right now. There's a lot of us that are reconnecting because we've come out of our bubble and we're resurfacing and we're working on our businesses. And instead we're popping out there with, I really could use some help on.
mm,
It's like, okay, first find out how I'm doing.
yeah,
Make sure that I'm okay. Make sure I have the capacity to give,
mm,
because I may not be in a spot that I can even think about that with, you know what I'm saying? The bandwidth.
mm,
We just
absolutely.
have
Yeah,
to be polite,
mm,
check
yeah,
somebody's bandwidth,
yeah,
because it may be we're
mm,
calling and they've resurfaced in our mind because we're supposed to help them.
mm,
And we don't always close our calls with that. We don't always say, is there anything
yeah.
I can do to help you?
And I think that we can separate out very clearly those people around us who are always the ones who are purely transactional, is in you do something for me, I do something from you, and to those who are just, I want to have a conversation with you. I'm interested in you. I want to know what's going on in your life. I want to know if there's something important that I didn't hear about and whether you need some support. They're different quality of relationships. And certainly for, like you, I sustain relationships over very long periods. So, people who I've worked with 20 years ago would still be in my contact, and I'm keeping, not because I want something from them, but because as a human being, I want to know that they're okay. And I want to let them know that, what's been going on in my world. And I think it's that understanding that we start with the human basis for the relationship, then we work out the other things. But first of all, how are you doing is probably the most important thing, isn't it?
Right. And I learned recently, because I work with a lady, Heidi Dunstan. If y'all don't know her, she's fantastic. Who's dealt with a lot of grief and helping people with that. And she likes the question, "How's today?"
Mm.
Because it's a little bit more myopic. It's a little
Yeah.
bit more digestible. How's your day, or
Mm.
how's today going? Because it's just, we can all talk about that.
Yeah.
How's today going? Or how's my
Yeah.
day? It's like, okay.
Mm.
So that's a tool. I just made a couple of notes here. I do want to say this
Yeah.
to our listeners here today, as far as, the whole thing about being a magnet to those worthy of your time and devotion. You have to be that too. So in referrals, if you're networking or in business or collaborating or even with a client, if you're expecting them to give you a referral, you better check yourself first and ask, are they somebody I can refer? If that person is not somebody you could refer, then do not ask them. I'm going to say it again. If that's not a person you would refer
Yeah.
yourself,
Mm.
do not ask them to refer you.
Mm.
And you talked about transactional. That's a quid pro quo thing. And I see more people doing that. And yet I'm thinking, why would you refer that? Oh, I don't refer that person, but I just ask them for referrals.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, asking a person that you don't think is worthy to refer out,
Mm.
it's a reflection of what you stand for. So I want y'all to learn that. And then the second thing is on friendships. One of my dear friends, Martha, said, when I was writing Collecting True Friends, she made a wonderful comment in there, and it's included in the book. And she said, do your friends invite you to meet their friends?
Mm.
Okay. So, why do you think I'm asking that? I mean, right? I mean, I know you're the interviewer here, but when she said that, I didn't quite get it at first. And she goes, if the people you're hanging out with don't think you're worthy to introduce to their friends, you got a problem.
Mm.
There's something not right there.
Mm.
So kind of like, so when we start looking at that, like, okay, say I've got 5 best friends near me.
Mm.
How many of their friends do I know? And if
Yeah.
the answer is no, I just have 5 best friends. They haven't
Mm.
introduced me to at least one other person, which makes it 10.
Yeah.
We're not growing our sphere, but there's a question. And I would go back and ask my friends. I'd say, we've been friends for decades. I've never met any of your other friends. You haven't asked me to go to lunch. You don't bring me to any of the parties. Like, I would like to get to know something. And it'll be interesting, because if they're not going, which is a referral,
Mm.
if they're not going to refer you as a friend to meet another friend, then there's something not quite right with that friendship. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
We can talk about
No, absolutely brilliant. I know we're going to bring things to a close in that, but I just wanted to say about that one, because I think that there's a real difference, different sides of the ponds here about how we see referrals. So certainly over in the US, I think referrals are seen as something that you would naturally do and you would ask for, and you would also promote other people. But we're very reticent about it in the UK and in Ireland. And it's something I work a lot with my clients on, in terms of ask for the referral. Not only is it good because you'll know whether they really do value your work, but you'll hear some feedback, which is really valuable feedback for you to know, because if there's issues in your performance, hear from it from somebody you admire and will support you, rather than hearing it from somebody who you don't know. So referrals are a really strong way of pulling out some of the feedback as well. So I really like that. But I think that there's a real reticence still I see over here for that.
And thank you for sharing the difference in the cultures, because it's really important to know. I think that's one of the biggest things here in America is we, even among ourselves, we see two different styles. We see the person that's actively going and aggressively asking, but I'm not a fan of that. So my fan is a person that's going to be a fan with me, and I'm going to be a fan for them, is somebody who wants the relationship first, like which is what we talked about. So it's like, first know me. You got to date a little bit, like date each other in business, not romantically date, but get to know each other, get to like each other, get to know what's interesting about, and then decide, okay, then I would do a referral. But I'm telling you, I see more and more people doing that. And I'm thinking, you just referred him. And why would you do that? You just told me the guy, you don't like the guy. Or
because that sense of obligation to do it, even if they don't fully agree with it. Yeah, I've been put in that position in LinkedIn a few times where somebody unrequested has done a referral for me and then asked me for a referral, and I was thinking, I think I'm just going to stay quiet now.
Right. It's weird. Okay, and I know you're trying to close up, but here's a quick analogy.
We could chat for hours, couldn't we?
I know, right? We gotta come back on this. This is so important. But here's the analogy. If you're going through the grocery store and you see the lady, and we'll just say her name's Jane, you know her enough because you've seen her name badge. She knows you enough because she swiped your card, right? Oh, hi, Miss Hawker. Okay, great. We know each other that way. But it's weird if, for example, if now when I'm going through the checkout lane, now I say to Jane, I go, Jane, my family's going away camping all weekend, and would you like to come and be out in the woods with us and go camp and be gone for a week? Jane would look at you like, what? Like, because that's advancing a relationship that has no foundation. That's how I see business people that want to come up and they're like, I don't know you. You haven't earned any keep with me. I have no traction record, but yet you want me to go recommend you to my sphere. That's weird. It's like asking me to go on a trip and all I know you from is the grocery store.
Yeah. No, it's a really good analogy. Yeah.
Thank you. I came up with that one.
Yeah. So let's leave it there. So I'm just going to summarize. The tips are, if you want to be a magnet, start with your values. And they can obviously find some exercises in your book, Collecting True Friends. I also see that somebody on the LinkedIn page has also offered an exercise that she has, if you want to get in touch with her, which is great. Thank you, Lisa Michelle. That's a great offer as well. Think about what you can give to a relationship, not just what you can take from it. And in the Great Reconnection, get some time together to find out what's been going on for people, as opposed to just giving them a whole broadcast of your life your way. Have some meaningful human connection with them, and start to build that bridge again if it's been broken.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, and
this is you. I'm just playing back your words here.
Lovely recap. Lovely recap. Oh, and the other thing we forgot to say is explain to them why you haven't been around.
Yeah.
Just because because people's first instinct is, you haven't called me in a year and a half or 2 years. What do you want?
Yeah.
It's just human nature.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So just make sure. I was just thinking about you, and I hope all's going well. And do not ask them for anything.
Yeah, I think that's really important. So I'm just going to put up here, if people want to keep the conversation going. It's been absolutely fabulous, Elizabeth, as I knew it would be. We always have really good conversations. So if you want to keep in touch with Elizabeth Duncan Hawker, you can find her on her email, which is elizabeth@duncan-hawker.com. She's also got a website of the same name, elizabethduncanhawker.com. And the other thing she's got a really nice giveaway that you could have a gift for you about 7 ways to effectively connect everywhere, every time. So wherever you are, you'll make connections. And that's in elizabethduncanhawker.com/secrets. So you can look that up and see.
It'll come right to you. I'm not going to spam you. I just want to leave people behind with like 3 pages of really pertinent things to think about how to do the reconnect. That's fabulous. Beautiful. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah. And people are used to me, Mary@agentstochange.com, and obviously on LinkedIn. So if you've got any comments either through the stream that you've been in or in the playback, please leave them. We will come back. We will add comments, and we'll just wish you a great day. Thank you for your time today.
Lovely. Thank you, everyone. Stay well, stay blessed.
Thank you.